Good morning. How are you guys doing? Very good. I'm so excited to be here. I want to thank Janique for thinking of me and connecting me with Professora Sylvia. I'm very honored to be here, and I'm going to share with you a couple of aspects of my journey for identity, decolonization. But before we begin, I have this tradition that I want you all to partake with me. It's a ceremony of reclaiming the land, reclaiming ourselves, reclaiming the time, reclaiming the space. And to begin, if I may ask you to please stand up, and we're going to do this poem together. It's a collective poem. And I started doing this because growing up, you know, I didn't feel comfortable doing the Pledge of Allegiance. I didn't feel it in my soul. It didn't connect with me. So, and then especially everything that's happening within the last 10 years, I felt that it was important to state affirmations that give us power, that give us strength, and that most importantly, give us healing and medicine. And our words are powerful, and these moments that we're sharing together are powerful. So I want you to please honor me with your participation. And the way this goes is I read the first line, and then you repeat after me. And it's just for us to create the union right now in this space. You guys ready? You good? Okay. I am an original inhabitant of this land.
I am an original inhabitant of this land.
I am not an illegal alien.
I am not an illegal alien.
I'm not a foreigner on this land.
I'm not a foreigner on this land.
I am indigenous.
I am indigenous.
I am beautiful.
I am beautiful.
I am brown.
I am brown.
I am light brown.
I am light brown.
I am dark brown.
I am dark brown.
I am beautiful.
I am beautiful.
I have the right to be free.
I have the right to be free.
I have the right to be me.
I have the right to be me.
I have the right to walk on my continent.
I have the right to walk on my continent.
I love you.
I love you.
I love me.
I love me.
We're all one people.
We are one people.
This is our land.
This is our land.
We will be free.
We will be free.
We've been interrupted
We've been interrupted
since 1492.
since 1492.
But we are here.
But we are here.
We are healing.
We are healing.
We are reclaiming.
We are reclaiming.
This is our land.
This is our land.
This is our continent.
This is our continent.
This is our land.
This is our land.
This is our continent.
This is our continent.
Beautiful. Thank you. And with that, can you guys see that okay? Yeah. We're good? Okay. The title, to begin, first and foremost, is just to acknowledge the land that we are on, acknowledging our brothers and sisters of Tonga nations, and honoring that we are borrowing this land as indigenous people, and honoring all of our ancestors that come before us and our descendants that will hopefully be impacted by our words and our actions. The title of my presentation today is Decolonization and Education of a Young Mexicana in Los Angeles. And the images I'm going to get into, we have the Rodney King beating, we have Prop 187, and then that's me fighting for Sister Joaquina, who was the lady that was brutalized by the Paris police. If you guys remember that 2 years ago, we did a campaign to defend her. So let's begin. You know, I'm a child of the 80s. What was I watching? What was I seeing? My journey of identity has a lot to do with novelas, has a lot to do with comedy, has a lot to do with what I was being exposed to at a young age. I was watching India Maria. I was watching novelas, Muchachitas, Rosa Salvaje, all these novelas, right? Most of you are probably too young to remember these. Some of them are replays, so you'll probably see them. But this is what I'm looking at, right? And all of these images at that time, obviously I didn't know, but they're carrying racialized ideas, they're carrying perspectives, they're carrying narratives. And I didn't know, right? I'm just a little girl, little brown girl, learning the messages, and that's what I'm getting exposed to. Now, in my days, 80s and 90s, I'm looking at cartoons, right? What are cartoons telling me? What are Barbies telling me? Most of you don't remember, but Shusha was big in the 80s. She was big. She had a big program in Spanish-speaking media, and I was obsessed. You know, I want to be Shusha. I want to have her shoes. I want to look like her. Barbie, back in those times, hasn't been too much of a difference now, but predominantly white, you know, blonde hair, blue eye. really, really thin figures. Speedy Gonzalez, right? What is cartoons telling me about me? And then later in the 90s, we have Pocahontas. So as you're looking at your identity, you're looking at the world, and you're trying to find yourself in the world, you're trying to find yourself in the media, but these are the messages, right, that I'm getting. These are the thoughts that I'm getting. And, right, the beauty standards, the stereotypes, and the ultimate desires as brown children, they're all being here, right? They're all being constructed for us. Now, I want to say that my identity, my journey of radical activism and radical, love of self had a lot to do with what happened in these years. This was in 1991. Rodney King was brutally beat by policemen, right? There was 4 or 5 men involved in that violation of his humanity, of his body, of who he was. At that time, that's what I'm seeing on TV, right? Now as I'm older, I can see the bigger picture, and just to put it into perspective, before this had happened, right? That's all we hear about. We only know about Rodney King. We don't hear this other story of what happened in South LA. Another thing that happened before the so-called LA riots was this 15-year-old black girl. Her name was Latasha Harlan. She was shot, 15 years old, by a Korean liquor store owner, right? This happened simultaneously around the same time, right? So when the verdict came in 1992 that these officers were acquitted, that was it. People were upset. They called it a riot, but in my understanding now, it wasn't a riot. It was an uprising. It was a frustration of feeling invalidated, of feeling invisible, of feeling dehumanized. And I want to share something. It's a long video, but I want to share. I think this gentleman really articulates exactly the moment, what happened, why people were out in the streets. Can you guys hear?
I feel that it's a great travesty of justice. I feel that the jury in Simi Valley gave the okay to continue to abuse and oppress and suppress black people in this country. I feel that there is an undercurrent of racism and that the system is brought to the fore. And I couldn't sit in my home and just watch it on television. I had to come here and let my voice be heard.
Where are these people from? And Pat, maybe you can go and show a little bit of a protest here. Where are these people from?
I think most of them, like myself, came down as individuals. I think we just decided that we were not going to sit at home and like couch potatoes and just watch. We have to be heard.
So these people, it's not an organized effort, you're saying?
This is not an organized effort. These are concerned citizens. We are the people. We are Rodney King's peers. We are Eula May Love's peers. We are Latasha Harlan's peers. Not that jury and Torah.
Maybe you can join us here real quickly. Do you have any sense this is organized, or is this going to keep growing?
I don't know if it's going to keep growing. I hope it keeps growing. We need all the support we can. I mean, we are his peers. We're the group of peers. You know, I don't understand this. I talk about one thing, it seems like to me the media wants to hype violence. You know, it's not about violence, but if it comes to that, then that's something we have to deal with when it comes about. But
Sorry, I'm gonna go back there. So, how do I go back to, here we go. Yeah, so as you guys can see, that's powerful, right? Seeing that as a little, I was 10 years old at this time. I'm looking at this, I'm living in Cudahy, California, not understanding what was happening. My mom couldn't really explain it to me. My family couldn't explain it to me. I have family all over South LA, Compton and Watts, and they were just worried. They were worried like what's gonna happen, like do we go participate, or stay home. And those were vague conversations that I remember, not having the consciousness that comes with understanding that this is a bigger part against attacks against our communities. But this was a very, very vital moment of my life. Even 10 years old, little kids know, they can connect this, they can feel it, they can see the frustration. And that's why it's so important that we continue to work with you, because these things are impacting and they are instilling traumas, without us knowing it. They are impacting our psychology, our sense of self, our sense of community. And that was a big, big part of my journey. And another huge one, huge, was Prop 187. It was also known as a Save Our State initiative. Can someone here kind of help me introduce what this meant? Those of you that remember this, those of you that have studied it. Yes.
It was about cracking down on illegal immigration and not allowing undocumented people to have healthcare coverage, and even education was huge. I remember being in a phone bank of a bunch of 14-year-olds calling everyone all over LAUSD to fight against it. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's absolutely what it was. And Governor Pete Wilson, he jumped on it. He didn't create it, but he jumped on it and made sure that it passed. And watching this, again, now I'm around 12 years old, right? Now I'm 12, I still don't know what's going on, but I'm seeing this, right? I was going to Gage Middle School in Huntington Park, and I saw students walking out, and I didn't know, but I saw the signs, I didn't join, I didn't know about politics, I didn't know any of this. And I remember, what I do remember is this particular ad about Prop 187, and I'm going to show it to you. It's very brief. It's only a minute long, but I want you to put yourself in the shoes of a 12-year-old watching this for the very first time. Your mom's cooking in the kitchen. Your dad's outside working on the car, and you're sitting there watching this.
They keep coming. 2 million illegal immigrants in California. The federal government won't stop them at the border, yet requires us to pay billions to take care of it. Governor Pete Wilson sent the National Guard to help the Border Patrol. But that's not all.
For California to work hard, pay taxes, and obey the laws, I'm suing to force the federal government to control the border. And I'm working to deny state services to illegal immigrants. Enough is enough.
Governor Pete Wilson.
Yeah. Does that ring a bell to you guys? Does that sound familiar with what we're going through today? Right? Any similar ads that remind you of this today? Any? Okay, sure.
There was this one governor, but I forgot what state he was from. He had an actual bus of where he wanted to collect all the immigrants or illegal aliens he brought into that bus. So if they vote for him, that's his agenda, was to literally caravan all the illegal aliens out of America. I forgot his name. I wish I remembered his name.
The same governor too. He made an ad with his kid, and he was and the kid was building a wall and everything, and he was like, "I'm pro-Trump. See, my kid's being raised right." And he was like, and the kid even said "Go Trump while building a wall" with Lego. And it was wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So what we're seeing, this is a California governor, right? That's what we're seeing here. And then now we have this president, right, who is in office, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But in my particular personal history, my particular lifetime, this, I'm looking at this, I'm looking at today, and there's seeds to what's happening. There's been a movement of anti-Mexican, anti-Central American, anti-Indigenous sentiments that are in policy, that people are voting, people actually create this purposely, intentionally. And again, little 12-year-old girl me, I'm like, what the heck? I remember feeling the anger, feeling wait, is that my mom? Is that my grandma? Is that me? Does this mean I'm not gonna go to school? Does this mean, and this is against the healthcare system. So basically, that's an attack against our health. And if you don't have access to healthcare, that means you're gonna die and you're not gonna get proper medical care. So that was an attack against our survival, against our life. You know, it's disguised as, you know, it's politics, it's illegal immigration, but really it's about destroying a group of people, right? And again, I'm in that mindset of a 12-year-old, and it hurt. I didn't know how to articulate it, I didn't know how to say it, but then looking back now, look at the passing figures. Where you have the dark green, that's where people voted 70% or more yes. Where it's red, those are the people that voted no, right? So this is a figure that not only, obviously, white European settlers voted on, but a lot of our own people voted for this. And there's been surveys and there's been studies exposing that. And that speaks to another dynamic in our community of being separated, not feeling that we belong to each other, feeling that those of us that have paper are different than those that are undocumented, and that hierarchy, right, of power and status. And so I didn't know this. Again, this is what I'm seeing is that ad, I'm looking at this, and this is all the reality that's happening behind it. So here we go, junior high, right? Junior high happens, I'm into punk rock, I have mohawks, I shave my head, I'm scribbling in class, 7th grade, Gage Middle School, and then my professor, a beautiful, beautiful black teacher, English teacher, Mrs. Roberts, I'm never gonna forget her. Mrs. Roberts, she's like, let me see that. She's like, let me see. She's like, this is poetry. And I was like, what? Like, you know what I mean? I didn't know. I was like, is that bad? Like, I'm like, I wasn't cursing, no curse words, nothing. I'm like, okay. And she's like, you don't know what poetry is? And I was like, no. You know, because I felt I was in trouble because I've been scribbling throughout the whole class. And she took that moment and she said, anybody in class, you guys know what poetry is? And no one raised their hand. This is 7th grade, LA. And she took that opportunity and she had us all write a poem, like the end of the month or so. And then she had us all put a little book together. It was a compilation of poems from all of us in the classroom. And then she had a poetry reading. She had a poetry reading the end of the semester or so. I'm never gonna forget that, right? Never gonna forget that. So mind you, I'm going through this, right? I'm looking at the politics. And now I know that there's something called poetry that's considered an art that I had no idea. And she's telling me I'm gifted. She's telling me that what I have to say matters, that what I have to say is poetry, and that it has a form of expression, and that I can do this. So that in itself was a big, big window for me, because I had no idea. I had no idea I had any talent. I had no idea I was gifted. You know, the things that I was growing up with, the things that I saw, none of that really gave me that foundation. Some of the things that I don't mention on the PowerPoint, but I saw a lot of domestic violence growing up. I saw a woman get shot in front of me when I was 6 years old. And you know, when you grow up and you see those things, to you life is not serious. You're just like, oh well, you know, we just make it throughout the day. And so you're living this, right? You're in this world, you're looking at the TV with these ads, and now you are in junior high and you're finding punk rock, you're finding resistance, you're finding poetry. And then in the ninth grade, powerful year for me, one of my college counselors, he was a Holocaust survivor, Mr. Levine, from Huntington Park High School. He came to our classroom, he had the tattoo, right? And he spoke about survival. He spoke about his experience, about hiding in a closet, about how his family were leaving. And I remember sitting there like, what the fuck? Like, how can, you know, like without knowing anything about who I was, without knowing anything about me, just that humanity, just that connection and that pain. And to top it off, that same teacher, ninth grade, took us to the Museum of Tolerance. Have you guys ever been to the Museum of Tolerance? Yeah. Few hands? Yeah. What do you guys think about the museum?
It's just sad. It's very sad. I remember getting a card of a little girl who didn't make it, you know, like you read her story and what she had gone through. And I was also a ninth grader, and it was a field trip with seniors when I had gone, but it was very emotional for some of them.
It's powerful, yeah. Right? You're in a building that uses the architecture right? Uses like information to tell a story. Something very recent that happened, but you can see it, right? You're in the gas chamber. You know, it makes it very real for you. And for me, again, meeting Mr. Levine, going to the Museum of Tolerance, I'm into punk rock, I have this anger, I have this rage, there's all these things going on, right? All these things going on. Bam! 1997, sorry, the words are out. That's when it all hit home for me. 1997, I'm in high school, I'm in 10th grade, and I'm in a punk band. I do what I do, right? I was the lead singer. We had a really cool song called Inmigración, and we were playing at San Matthias Church in Huntington Park, and we're jamming out, you know, and the lyrics said something like, somos iguales aunque seamos ilegales. We are the same even though we are illegal. Somos humanos, something like that, right? So it was like very like, we're all human beings, even if we're illegal, you know, we still deserve rights. So I'm doing that song, it was real cool. I get off the stage and someone hands me a flyer that looked like this. And there was a club at my high school called CMIC, Chicano, Mexicano, Mexican Empowerment Committee. And they handed this to me, and I was learning more stuff, right? It said the accomplishments of our people. It talked about we're the survivors of the biggest genocide. And I'm looking at it, you know, I'm critical, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, nah, this is not that bad. Like, it can't, no, 95% of my answer, no way. Like, but Hispanic or Latino, I'm like, all right, cool, I could get with it, but it was like, it doesn't really matter, you know, and I'm like, who are these dudes, you know? Because I was real feminist back then, hardcore feminist. I'm like, who are you trying to check a sister, you know what I'm saying? Like, I was like, nah, like, you know what I'm saying? I need to check these little layers that are coming at me. But sure enough, I was intrigued. I was like, wait a second. Let me go to the library. I'm not really going to school right now, but, you know, I'm going, yeah, ditching a lot. But then I was inspired. I was inspired to go to the library. I was inspired to go to class. I was inspired to find out more about this, right? And then I started learning. I'm like, wait, is this true? Like, is this true? What this propaganda is saying, is this true? Why don't I know this history? Do my parents know? I asked my mom, I asked my grandma, I asked my own aunts and uncles. They're like, well, la verdad, mija, no sabemos. You know, sorry, mija, we don't know, you know? And then feeling angry because they didn't know. So I'm like, then this must be a lie because they know everything. And they have to know this, right? But then learning that most of my family members, you know, obviously went to 3rd, 4th grade. And then we'll get into the education system of Mexico later. But all this was like, wait a second, there's this big old world of truth about who I am, about who my family is, and we don't know. I was like, that kicked in so hard, it kicked in. I was just like, that anger I had, that rage I had, I was like, wait a second, there's so much more to us, there's so much more to my history, to my mom's history. And then, let me tell you, I went to the 99-cent store, and back then they had cool stuff. I mean, they still do, but I found this book, right? It was like a mind figure. And I was like, I'm gonna write about how I feel right now, right? And with my little typewriter, because I couldn't afford a computer, I was like, poems about, right? Click, you know? And so I came up with, it says, poems about my culture and all the lies. And I titled my poetry book, and this is August 21st, 1997, right? And what did I say? I said, I have decided to become a warrior because I want to do something for my people. I think it is very important to know our history in order to know what our future will be like. It seems that every Mexican has assimilated into Eurocentric systems that don't really care who they are. This should not be happening. So, and you'll see my little poetry book, you know, I have my little moments, but that was 1997, right? And I was like, okay, poetry, this is an expression, this is something I can do. I started taking myself serious in school, and not only did I start participating, I took it to a whole other level. So We had the Chicana Mexican Empowerment Committee, and I joined Youth Action, which is like a youth group for like environmental justice, social justice. I created Women in Action Now, and focusing on women's issues. I started speaking in my classrooms. My teachers would allow me to talk to my peers and say, come after school and go to this period. So I was in school, all of a sudden I started going, I'm taking myself very serious. Not only that, but my own teachers are like, can you stay for the next period? I'll excuse you. I'll tell Mr. Huerta, you're gonna be here. I'm like, okay. So I have my own teachers saying, you know what? We like what you're saying. This is information we don't know. So go ahead, go ahead and share it. Go ahead and talk to your peers. And I was speaking at KPFK. I was speaking to media, going to protest. I was invited to the UCLA Writers Retreat. And this was awesome. This was like 5 youth from every USD school and a high school were invited. And we did another compilation of poetry, right? So here comes my life, full circle, right? So I'm at UCLA and I'm participating with great youth, right? And we put together this poetry book, again, in high school. So this whole thing about poetry keeps coming into my life, right? And that was our club, that's from the yearbook. This is 1998, this is 1997. This is in front of, we had an office in Huntington Park, and it was Youth for Environmental Justice. And then this is me, 97, and we had to reenact the Chicana walkout. And so all this is happening, right? And all this compared to my thought process before, all this knowledge made me realize I am smart. I have something to say. We have a beautiful history. We come from a great legacy of people. And I'm not gonna let whatever I went through, whatever I experienced, whatever trauma was inflicted on me, I realized that I have ownership over what I do with myself, over what I think, over how I contribute, and how I engage with other people, that we can change what we were born into. That it doesn't have to be the same. That my little sister doesn't have to go through what I went through. That my neighbor doesn't have to go through what I went through. And so I've been an activist, participating in high school was huge. Huge, it was powerful, it was beautiful. It taught me importance, commitment, dedication. And what am I learning, right? You guys know this already? I'm learning that everything we've been called, Latino, Hispanic, that all that are just systems of identity that connect us to Europe, right? That's what I'm learning. We're not the Roman Empire. We don't speak Latin. I have a brother here, he's a Nahuatl teacher, which we'll get to later on. But we'll tell you that language is power, right? We'll say that language is power. Spanish is not our language. Latin is not our language. We're not native of any of these land masses. What am I learning? I'm learning about Hispanic, right? I wasn't too hip to it, but then when I learned the truth behind it, I was like, wait a second. You guys recognize that guy? Right? So, we're looking at this, right? All right, so who's this? Do you guys know about this guy? Yes. And then this guy, that? And then this is a very famous painting. Do you guys know who did this one? Diego Rivera. Diego Rivera, amazing art. But just to kind of capture like Hispanic, usually when we hear Hispanic, they use our culture, right? You see the Aztec calendar, you see elotes, mariachis, but the essence, the foundation of that term is a very Spanish-centric, a very Eurocentric terminology. And it says, these are Spaniards. Speaking the Spanish language does not make us Spanish, just like speaking English does not make us British, right? Because if language defines you by participating in it and speaking it, then all of us here are British, right? All of us Asians are British. African Americans are British. Most of them have English surnames, right? Most of them speak English. But it doesn't work like that, right? The logic doesn't apply to them as much as it applies to us. Why? Right? I'm learning all this. And then we get into this, right? We're looking at America, the Estados Unidos. And then we're, again, being conscious of land, being conscious of who are we, What land are we on? What is the indigenous groups that were here before the United States? What are these lands called? Questioning language, right? We're questioning definitions. We're questioning ideologies. And in this case, in my journey, I want to decolonize. I want to unpack what has been constructed and manufactured and given to me. I want to unpack it. I want to open it up, dissect it, let's put its bits and pieces everywhere, and let's really be critical about what we're being given to believe, to digest, to take into our mindset, our philosophy of life. And that was real big. This is a huge one for me. Accomplishments, right? I brought this beautiful book with me. Growing up, right? What do we think about being native, being indigenous, right? What are the stereotypes to this day that we have, right? There's a lot of stereotypes, right? Oh, drunks, dumb, lazy, but yet you're learning your history, and this is a beautiful book, beautiful book. It's called American Indian Contributions to the World, 15,000 Years of Inventions and Innovations. So it reads like an encyclopedia, A through Z, and it explains to you, and it tells you the very many contributions given by our ancestors that a lot of the times we're not given credit for, right? In the sciences and mathematics and a bunch of other systems of knowledge. And this book is beautiful if you're educators, for your, if you want to sit down with your nieces and nephews. These are conversations that we should be including in our daily lives. So this was huge, right? So it's not just about questioning knowledge, it's questioning what history we've been given, the narrative that's been explained, and then talking about, if you guys are noticing, we're combining it all together, right? We're saying that European borders, they don't define us, right? What we're talking about is pan-indigenism, we're talking about the common experience, and we're talking about civilizations older than anything ever created in Europe, first and foremost. But we're talking about the sophistication, the architecture, the mathematics, and this goes way back. And then obviously, when we're talking about genocide, like I shared, right, and many of you have shared, the Museum of Tolerance. There's a museum, right, that talks about the Jewish experience, the Jewish history of genocide. In my research, now at Citlalli, I was interested about who was this man? Where does this concept come from? Genocide. What does this mean? And why isn't it applied to our people and our experience? So first and foremost, let me recommend this book, American Holocaust. There's other books, but this is, I would say, the book that really takes it to the forefront, that really explains the genocide of our people, that really brings down the primary sources, who wrote what was the intention, and he really gives you a continental view of what happened to our ancestors, right? And the other one is The Other Slavery. This was more new. This one came out 2017 by Andres Resendiz. This is an amazing book as well, because he says that our ancestors, which most of us know that, right? But it hasn't been academically challenged. It hasn't been put into the narrative, into the archive. And he argues that the slavery that our ancestors went through was simultaneously practiced during, African slavery. But it wasn't called slavery because the Spanish crown had outlawed, right, that, they figured that we had souls. So as Native people, you have souls, so you can't be enslaved, right? That was the verdict, right? The Spanish crown said, you can't enslave them, they have souls. Black people don't have souls, according to the Spanish crown. So you can enslave them, but not Native people. But they came up with encomiendas, right? They came up with all these other institutions that practice slavery without calling it slavery, because if they found you to be practicing slavery, then they took away your land as a Spaniard, as a Portuguese. If you're practicing slavery, then you're going against the Spanish crown. We're gonna penalize you, take away your land. So what do? Don't call it slavery, call it encomienda, right? You're gonna work on this land, and it still happens in Mexico to this day, right? You're gonna work on this land where you're gonna need electricity, you're gonna need food, buy it from my store, buy it from my little tiendita over here. You're gonna need clothing, you're gonna need shelter, I'll rent you. You can stay here in this little shed, right? So it's a system that's just exploiting and taking. There's no equality, there's none of that, right? It's just exploitation. And then we get into the archive. What I've been studying as a historian is images, right? Images. How were our ancestors perceived? How were they drawn? How were they remembered? How were they explained? How were they described to the rest of Europe? How were they described to the rest of the world? And the most important thing in genocide, which I think is coming up, is genocide. The concept of genocide. Raphael Lemkin, who is the Polish Jew that coined the term, he actually studied indigenous experiences, Native American experiences, and he used our experience in his research and in his arguments to why such a term should exist. When I found that, I haven't, I'm sure it's been researched other places, but I had not read that before. So what that made me think, I was like, wow, this is a big slap in the face to our people, because the man himself, Raphael Lemkin himself, and I'll get to the slide, he himself is using our ancestors as an experience, saying, this is what happened to natives, this is what happened to the Inca, this is what happened to the Mexica, that is genocide. And his research papers were not published because he died very young. He died in around 40-ish. But that's what we're learning, right? That the concept of genocide itself isn't even applied to us when the man himself used us as that experience. Now, when I explain this, it's kind of hard for people to say, what do you mean we survive? I'm not indigenous, which we'll get to a little bit. But what my knowledge, what I'm learning collectively through my elders, through this guidance, is the history, which you'll get here, is that the genocide of 95%, right, of our people. So what that tells you, and he says this in this book, is that there's indigenous populations that we will never know ever existed because they were wiped out 100%, right? That is an injustice, not just to us as indigenous people, but to humanity, right? If humanity is about beautiful diversity, being human and celebrating our cultures, this experience of invasion and genocide wiped out 100% of some native groups that we don't even know. We don't know what their names were, we don't know what their culture was like, but that's the crime of genocide, that's the crime of colonization. And so what we're looking at is 95% of our people killed. And what I want to argue, a lot of the times they say, how did Indians die? Do you guys know? Like, what's the stereotypical answers we get? The justifications for, indigenous depopulation, as they call it?
Indian Removal Act.
Indian removal, okay.
And then also the Manifest Destiny.
Manifest Destiny, okay. How do you, the conservative narrative, what do they say about how Indians died?
Manifest Destiny was more of like, their whole concept was that they were destined for the land, so if there was any indigenous people, they would just wipe them out with no penalties or no punishment. And then the same goes with the Indian Removal Act, which literally gave permission for the colonizers to basically kill us for our land.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I studied history textbooks from the last 15 years, right? And the narrative, the talk, right, when they describe the Indian battles, right, Indian wars, the great Indian decline, the Indian depopulation. And I'm like, okay, if we were to use that same language to describe the Jewish Holocaust, imagine, let's see how that would sound. Jewish battles, right? The Jewish battles against Hitler and the regime, the Jewish decline, the Jewish depopulation, right? What does that language do when you say Indian depopulation, Indian battles, Indian wars? It faults that person that died, right? You fought. Hey, you depopulated yourself. You should have had immunity to smallpox. That's your fault, right? So ultimately, it clears you of any whatsoever false accountability or influence over what happened to the population. That's my biggest concern, my biggest upset with terminology in academia, is that the simple language used to describe our experience already gives them zero fault, right? It just happened, right? In the studies that I've come across, what I'm trying to uncover, and it's really hard as a historian, because you're told primary sources, you need it in writing, you need it in writing, you don't always have it in writing. So as a historian that's trying to decolonize, that's trying to put together these pieces, your approach, your method is circumstantial evidence, right? When you have circumstantial evidence, what does that do? Right? When you do circumstantial evidence, you're in court. Circumstantial evidence. I don't have it written. You didn't text me you were going to be there at 8. You didn't text me you were going to be there at 8 o'clock. But, you know, you called so-and-so at this time, and then you got to her house at 8:05, and you live a mile away. Like, you had to put it together like you're in court. Right? So me in academia, my experience has been really difficult because I don't have the written document saying, we killed them, we use smallpox. We don't get that written statement until the 1800s, where they talk about the smallpox in the blankets, in the Indian blankets. So before then, it's hard, right? So, but when I say biological warfare, the intentional use of smallpox, they say it wasn't intentional. They just died, you know, like, hey, they just died, poor them. But if you look at the evidence, if you study the actions and the interactions of the Spanish and the Mexica, at this time the Mexica Aztec, well, why is it that the people that they allied with didn't die of smallpox? Why is it that the people that aligned themselves with the Spanish were healthy? Well, I mean, you know, to that degree, they didn't die of smallpox, right? The enemies with Tlaca died of smallpox. You had a whole groups of soldiers all around that were fighting them. All of a sudden, they're dying of smallpox. But the people that you're fighting with are cool? I'm sorry. There seems to be a little selection going on, right? There seems to be, yeah, maybe they didn't have the science behind it. Okay, we're going to mix this up. We're going to put a little science lab. But the practice of biological warfare, let me tell you, that was done in Europe. The practice of biological warfare, they already knew how to do biological warfare in Europe. So you're going to tell me that you do that with each other, and then you come to our land, and all of a sudden you don't know what's happening? All of a sudden it's like, well, I don't know. I'm like, you're doing it to your own brother in Europe. Get me? But that logic is missing, and a lot of people don't like to say that it was intentional, because you're disrupting a whole system of people. You're disrupting a whole institution of logic and academia and apologetic historians. You're disrupting a big shift, and you're starting to shake things up, right? But that's the challenge that we have as historians, as English majors, as science majors. This is all connected to what you're studying. You're gonna find your history, your culture somewhere in there. It's either being repressed or it's being celebrated. It's either being suffocated, exploited, but it's there, right? So that's what we're getting into, biological warfare. Those of us that survive, right? Those of us that survive are branded, right? First of all, let's go back to forbidden knowledge. Not only did we survive the genocide, those of us that survived, the Spanish crown passed laws forbidding indigenous knowledge. Right, so after you go through the physical, the most violent aspects of genocide and invasion, they passed laws forbidding indigenous knowledge. What does that look like? That looks like them going town to town, right? If they find you practicing anything indigenous, if you have an indigenous sculpture, if you have anything that looks like a god in their view, right? You were publicly executed. Right? You were publicly executed. This took decades upon decades upon the first century were the most violent extirpation campaigns. Right? And there's historians that are talking about that. It wasn't, a lot of people think, oh, well, we just became Christian, we just became Catholic. No. It wasn't a natural reaction. It was beaten out of us. It was killed out of our communities. And the psychological effect of that comes through the process of genocide and colonization. And I say that because it's really important to understand the product of the process of Catholic religion, Christianity is really important. You know, not to offend people, not to, you know, like, this is not about that. This is about understanding the process, understanding the dehumanizing efforts that took place. And most importantly, what happens? Mestizo, okay, now we're mestizo. Okay, now we're Latino. Okay, here come the casta systems. Okay, you know what? Now European, Spanish. Now this Spaniard, you're gonna keep this part of the land. This Spaniard, we're gonna keep this part of the land. We're gonna start just dividing it all up, right? And what do we know that today as? Nationalism, right? This is a big upset. Before I was nationalist, before I was like, yeah, Mexico, Salvador, Guatemala, which I'm still down for my people. I'm still down for my people. But when you're unpacking and you're looking at the history of nationalism, you start understanding that the power of European borders, that wasn't our ancestors saying, yeah, let's call it Salvador, let's call it Mexico. The Spaniards and the Europeans that took over our resources and our lands, they didn't leave. With the Mexican independence, that wasn't Mexicans like our people in power. They used a lot of our people in the fights and the battles, but the leadership was criollo. The leadership of Mexico, like other Central American countries, South American countries, they are criollo. They are direct descendants of Europeans, right? And so they want to keep power, kind of like what happened in the US. What happened in the US, right? The 13 colonies uprising against the British, right? And then what happened there? To our brothers and sisters, right? It's like they have a new leadership now. But is that Native American? Did our Native American brothers and sisters have ownership of that? No. If anything, their ideas were stolen for the Constitution. If anything, their ideas were stolen for the suffragist movement. That's a whole other story, right? But the same pattern is we Europeans are now here. We don't want to give tribute to the motherland. We don't want to give tribute to Spain, to England, or whichever. We're going to establish a distinct and unique nation that's going to make us have power over this. Therefore, we keep anything that comes from here is ours. We no longer have to give tribute, right? And that's where we come. Mexican independence, 1821, right? Nicaragua, Honduras, Costa Rica, Guatemala, established 1838. El Salvador, 1841. Panama, 1903. Belize, 1981. And our people leadership, maybe you'll see some alcaldes that are our people, you know? But even as recent as Vicente Fox. Vicente Fox was Irish and something else. He even said it himself at a press conference. Before he left office, at a press conference, he said, oh, like I can relate to Mexicans. I can relate to them having paisanos, because I have the same experience. The Mexican president is telling you, I'm not Mexican. I am European. He didn't go around and say it, but that's what we read in between that. So our idea to think that, when they say, oh, Mexico screwed up, like Mexico's corrupted, Mexico has a lot of bad things. But you can't fault us and say that that's our 100% blame, that's our 100% authority, because it's not. We need to be honest. We need to look at the leadership. We need to look at the power structure. The power structure is still European. The power structure is still European. You cannot tell me that it's our fault because we haven't thought, we haven't been the leaders, the leadership of our lands, of our countries for the last 5 centuries. It's starting to happen. It's happened in some places, but we're not there yet. All right? Let's talk about Spanish-speaking media. Do you guys remember this or no? Is this too old? No. Okay. So, so Christina, right? So we have, it says white Spanish-speaking Europeans dominating indigenous survivors. All right, let's start out with Don Francisco. Let's start out. We grew up watching him, right? Sábado Gigante, like, I had tias that were crying when the show, like, that when he was gone. I'm like, no, Francisco. Because that's what we grew up with, right? And a lot of our people were on that show. He was really, a lot of our own talents were on there. But we need to expose this because they're trying to exploit our culture and our people and not being really transparent about who they are. So let me introduce you Don Francisco. His real name is Mario Luis Kretzberger Blumenfield, right? Known as Don Francisco, right? And when I was like, you know, and nothing against him, and I believe he's Jewish, nothing against that. But what I'm saying is they're manufacturing a character, right, that speaks to our people, right? Because why? Why are they so concerned about getting Mexican, Central American audiences? Do you guys have an idea? Why are they doing all this? Why are they like making up these characters and coming up with all these schemes to try to get our people to participate? Because we're the majority, right? It's all tied to capitalism, it's tied to the exploitation of our demographics, and it just presented like a very natural thing. But believe me, I studied media. They spend bucks on seeing how can they advertise, how are they gonna do this, how do they get audiences, how do they get you to spend your money? Marketing, right? Marketing. Latino and Hispanic are marketing tools, right? We make up, say, 80-90% of the population as Mexican, Central American, South American folks. If they, you know, if they were to divide up, okay, we're gonna have a commercial for this, now we're gonna have a commercial for Guatemala, now we're gonna have a commercial for people from Cuba, that's a lot of money that they're gonna spend, right? So, let's do something. Let's come up with one term and get them all in one room, right? Let's get you all in one room. So you can spend, so all your money goes to all of us, right? We don't really care about your unique cultures or, no, you're all the same. It's a melting pot, right? It's a melting pot, we're all the same, right? By grouping all people who speak Spanish in one group, corporations can target one audience at the same time and maximize their exposure and profit. Nice, right? So we gotta be very critical about this. Like I said, we make up the majority. This is the census from 2010, right? Mexicans made up 64.9% of all that, right? The facts, statistics, they're all there. And I say identity is power. Colonial terms reinforce white supremacy and the intention to diminish our existence as owners of this land. If you're branded Hispanic and Latino, you're branded to Europe. You're gonna be like, oh yeah, we're somehow related to Europe. And that steals your power to connect to this land and to connect to your ancestors and to connect to what is yours. So calling you Hispanic or Latino doesn't threaten the system. It doesn't threaten, the establishments, the institutions. And the biggest one is the myth of mestizaje. This one's harsh, you guys, because we grew up with this, right? We're all mestizo, but we're all just mixed anyway. Jose Vasconcelos, he wrote this book, Raza Cósmica, in 1925. He is a criollo himself. I studied this man, he is a criollo. And in his book, it is the most racist little book. It's a little essay you'll read from Mexico in early 20th century. He promotes eugenics, right? Do we know what eugenics is? Right? Modifying human qualities to bring the utmost, right, characteristics in human biology. Racism against all non-white people, population control of indigenous people. It's there. If you're interested, I can show you some links to where to get more information. He's talking about, yes, we're a brand new race, una nueva raza. But Spanish is number one, Spanish religion is number one, Spanish language is number one, Spanish beauty is number one. So there's a farce to this idea. There's a big lie of mestizaje. But this is Raphael Lemkin. He's the gentleman that coined the concept of genocide. And I have another presentation on my YouTube that you guys, I have the whole hour dedicated to him. And I go in and I talk about how his definitions of genocide fit our experience, especially this last one. And I need to mention this one real quick. Normas Venice, okay? Part of genocide is imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. Normas Venice, I really recommend you watch this documentary, okay? This is a documentary about how Mexican women in the 70s would go into the general hospital about to give birth, and as they're about to give birth, the doctor's telling them, oh, do you want to be sterilized? And all this scientific jargon, and the ladies will say, oh, okay, yeah, whatever, Like, dude, I'm about to give birth, like, let me get my child. So these women were sterilized, without them knowing. So you go in with a child, come out with your baby, and you never are able to reproduce again. This documentary, it should be on YouTube. I'm not sure if it's on Netflix, but please watch it. Normas Venice. We're not talking about 500 years ago. Yes, there's an experience. There's all this genocide. We're talking about as recent as the 70s. And this is documented. Who knows what else is happening now? We know it's happening because it's so institutionalized, right? But this is a powerful documentary. So, and we know about this. I still want to share. We know, now that I'm older, I'm learning my history, I can connect the dots and I can see that this is dehumanizing our people, that ridiculing who we are as indigenous people results in death, right? This is when she was killed. This is the lady that was running from Border Patrol, shot in the head for running from Border Patrol. We have much more deaths now, right? All the children that are dying under U.S. Customs. This is a slide from last year. I need to update it, right? This is a game. This is a video game that you shoot at it. Depending on who you shoot, you get points. Welcome to the United States. So I took a screenshot of this video game. I've tried to report it. I've tried to get my friends and community to report it. But this is the reality that we're up against right now. This is the type of violence that we're up against. And now, I'd like to say, as a journey, I'm still on the journey. I'm still learning. I'm still decolonizing. I'm still trying to, learn more and grow. And my journey, I ended up at Citlalli College. It took me a couple of years. You can see that. There's a lot of things happening in my life. But I knew that I had to get it together. I knew that I had to get it together because I had to represent, I had to bring this truth. Finally, I got the resources I needed, the therapy that I needed, and finished 2013. While at the same time, when I was at Citlalli College, we created a Nahua Studies Club. We protested colorism and machismo within Chicano studies. That's very uncomfortable, right? Very uncomfortable, but we had to do it, right? And I have more on that if you guys are interested. We did the anti-Columbus Day protest. We did a genocide museum. We did 2-day conferences where we had high schools coming, middle schools coming in. Beautiful activism. Finally transferred to Citlalli, and I finished my BA within a year and a semester, right? A year and a semester, because by the time I transferred to Citlalli, I was like, you know what? I'm here. I'm going to do this. I'm getting my degree real quick, right? So I graduated. I got my BA. And I'm continuing my activism, media, community outreach. And then lastly, now, I just graduated 3 weeks ago, summa cum laude, and I was the honor student at the ceremony, which they made me stand up and, they said really nice things about me. That was 2019, MA History, Creating Decolonizing Academia, Collaborations. This is me at ELAC, right, 2013. This is when I graduated from 2016, BA, and this is a few weeks ago. And my little hat says, for LA Brown Girls. And what am I doing? Well, we all have stories to tell, right? Our narrative hasn't been talked about. It hasn't been exposed. So I published my poetry book in 2013. There's so many versions of this. So my little poetry book, I was so inspired, right? I said, I need to get it together. I'm like, if people tell me, no one's gonna publish you, you're crazy, doesn't radical. And I was like, all right. I'm like, well then, maybe I don't need no one to publish me. Yeah, so I published myself. I self-published on Amazon, and it's called Obsidian Blades. And I'm so proud to say it's being used at Golden State College in Citlalli. All right, and I published this before I even had my BA. So you can just imagine all these thoughts I had, right? I don't even have a bachelor's yet. How can I publish? How am I this? Like all these battles within myself, right? But I had the right circle of friends, the right circle of words that said, you still have a voice, you still have a narrative, you still have a story regardless of any degree. So that was powerful. And that's my book. and I speak, I go wherever I'm invited. I'm so happy to share what I'm doing. This is part of the syllabus. This was the book, but this is part of the syllabus where it mentions my book. And as far as what I'm doing now, let me just bring my pictures here. This was at January at the Indigenous Peoples March with my sister Janet from Brown Mujeres Media. This is me interviewing the historian behind Normas Venice. Amazing sister, beautiful sister. That's me at Citlalli College, 2008. Arizona, protesting the Show Us Your Papers law. Fighting for my sister, the lady that was violated by the Paris police. Have you guys heard of that? She was thrown on the ground, brutally violated. I did a press conference. I got a group of my friends together. We fought it, and recently, as of last month, she won that court case. So action does result in responsive and justice, and it feels good when you see that manifest. So if you're interested, I have my little card, but you can find my work on YouTube and Facebook, Tlaca Women Warriors. I'm on Instagram, a little bit more of my work. And I think this is so important because I think it just means to amplify your voice, right? If I can make a shirt, I want to shirt like this. Just amplify your voice. What you say matters. What you have to tell the world matters. Amplify it. And yeah, my next projects, I'm finishing my thesis, I'm not done yet. I am a co-host to a podcast called Decolonizing with my brother, Tlaca, who's here with me today. He's a Nahuatl teacher, and I'll show you a link to his work. And it's every month. You guys can listen to it on Spotify, SoundCloud, and we're planning a Nahuatl culture conference. I'm hoping like November, December, in East LA. I'm working on a documentary called Hidden Natives. So as the name suggests, all of us that are native that are hidden by the US Census, by these politics of identity. I'm working on my second book and producing more. And this is it here. So what can you guys do, right? Professora Sylvia asked me, what can you guys do? There's so much, there's so much you guys can do. There's no right way, no wrong way. Whatever feels good to you, whatever feels good to your soul. I would recommend starting with where you're at, right? What land are we on? How do I find out? How do I honor the indigenous people here? There's this link called native-land.ca. You type in your zip code, the city you live in, and they'll tell you, like, what are the indigenous nations there. Interview your grandma. Interview your family members. I interviewed my grandma. She passed last July, and I was lucky enough and very grateful that I was able to interview her throughout the years. And you learn so much about your family history, about their thoughts, their views on identity, on their struggles, and you'll sometimes find that, pues ay, tu bisabuelo hablaba, que sabe qué lenguaje, right? What makes it hard, right? Because we lose that tradition of our languages, but you at least get a glimpse of what that was, and that's powerful. I would say research, even what I said today, research, please, find things you're interested in. Use your own talent, your own creative forces. You're all creative. You all have talents. If you want to further the dialogue, you want to further the narrative, and talk to your neighbors, community knowledge. It's not, you don't have to go outside of your state or get a platform. No, just with each other. Start that talk, start that dialogue. And if you're interested, like I said, in Nahuatl, my brother Tlaca, if you go to speaknahuatl.com, he does great work. They offer Nahuatl lessons all over Cali, right? He has a place Sundays.
Yeah, a la Plaza de Cultura y Artes. It's a Mexican Chicano museum, but we do have classes there every Sunday at 12 p.m. So if you guys want to check it out, it's a different way of learning. It's all oral, and we get in a circle and we just start, speaking. The purpose is for you to be able to speak the language and to be able to speak to native speakers of today, because there's 1.5 million Nahuatl speakers in Mexico right now. So it's important to empower them as well, to be able to speak with them.
Yep. So, yeah. And then lastly, be patient, be loving, compassionate with yourselves and others. So that's the website where you type in, you know, where you're from, where you live. But yeah, it's a great resource. Is it here?
Just click on search. Where it says search?
I saw.
Oh.
And books that I recommend are right here. Like I said, on my Instagram page, I always try to post books that I'm reading. I like giving book reviews. I grew up reading, you know, watching Reading Rainbow, so I'm really inspired. You know, I'm really inspired. And lastly, I want to give a special thanks to Jenny and Professor Sylvia. I'm so happy to be here, guys. I'm so excited. And, you know, I'm available to 11 o'clock, and then I have to get to work. But I'm here, let's connect, let's talk. There's things we can do, there's events, there's art, there's a whole beautiful world of, you know, of our history and heritage waiting for us. So, with that, that's what my thing.